Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond Sunday from Cornerstone Fellowship. I hope you got a chance to watch this last weekend where I got a chance to have a conversation with our worship director, John Orozco, and he was able to unpack a lot of things. It was a really heavy service. It was a really heavy conversation, um, but it was really powerful. And John's story is so compelling, and the way he was able to weave in the history of Black people in this country with his own story, I think was really moving and enlightening for a lot of people in our church. I've heard from a lot of you that have spent time sitting with it, and a lot of texts or emails from people that are like, hey, I just finished it and I don't really have a lot of words right now, but I'm really glad you guys did that. Or, John was so incredible or whatever. So I know it's like churning us up. But this is Beyond Sunday, where we go a little deeper, or we go off on tangents together. And that's why I've invited my buddy, Ryan Rucker, to be a part of this conversation. You saw Ryan and his story as a part of the service. And so, yeah, say hi to Ryan, everybody. Or I guess, Ryan, you say hi. The people can't talk to you right now.
What's up? Yeah, I don't think so, but that's all right. I'll say hi.
Yeah. And so what we want to do today, both Ryan and I want to just talk through some of the responses that we're seeing from people as they're trying to place themselves in this story, mostly white folks who are trying to figure out, wait, what's going on here, and what am I supposed to say, and how they're work processing through their own feelings, or they're trying to figure out how they can be helpful, or what complicity they have. There's just sort of the emotional journey that they're on. And in the service, I talked a little bit about how our brains sort of work against us as white people in this moment, because we have told ourselves a story of what America is and who we are and the progress we've made for towards equality in this country, and how hearing these very contemporary stories, from microaggressions all the way to murder and everything in between, how it violates that story, and how it sort of compels us. We have a bias towards pushing back and a bias towards minimizing, because our brain is telling us like, no, you already have like a narrative of the world. You already have a structure that sort of like works for you. And that is, yeah, slavery was bad, but then MLK, and then the civil rights movement, and then Barack Obama, and here we are. And like, now we live in a post-racial society where everybody's happy and good. And that narrative, I think, worked for a lot of white people and helped them order their worlds. And now hearing these stories, they're like, wait a second, if I'm going to accept your story, that means I have to reject the story that I've been telling myself. And so what I'm seeing is, a lot of folks that are trying to push back, or they're frustrated, and it's kind of, sometimes it's well intentioned, sometimes it's not. Frankly, Ryan and I aren't really going to talk to trolls, or if you're in this to try to tell anybody that racism isn't real, like you're so far from where what the truth is, that like I'm not sure that this conversation is going to be super helpful to you. But if you are trying to reconcile new information and trying to figure out what your role is now that you've seen, and you have that feeling of like, okay, now that I have seen, I am responsible, but I feel very behind. I've got voices in my ear telling me one thing and voices in my ear telling me another thing. I don't know how to, then hopefully this conversation will be helpful to you. So the hope is, we talked about why people have the instinct to push back and minimize, and what about, and actually both sides. And have you thought of all those things that folks do, and things that I've done in my own past. But today we're going to talk about how, like, actually specific ways that we see people doing this. And we're going to try to sort of talk through maybe a more empathetic, Jesus focused way to have these conversations. Cool. So why don't we start? I mean, we might as well just like get right into it. And like one of the things that I see is this this Black Lives Matter, and then this response from almost always from white folks, which is all lives matter. And I want to start with maybe what you think you might be saying, when you say that? And then Ryan, I would love to hear from you on like what maybe what you really are saying, whether you know it or not. And
Oh
so
yeah.
what you might think you're saying when you say all lives matter is no, as a follower of Jesus, I believe that we are all equally loved and that we are all equally made in the image of God and that everybody is important to him. And to be so clear, that is absolutely true. That is part of the foundation of the gospel, is that we are made in the image of God, that both Ryan and I and every other, the 8 billion people we have on earth, are equally precious and important to God. So that might, maybe, especially if you're kind of new to the language of this moment, you might be thinking, well, wait, isn't that the truth? Isn't it all lives? And so maybe when you see somebody say Black Lives Matter and you see somebody say all lives matter, you find yourself saying it. Maybe that's what you mean. But Ryan, let's just have like a conversation about maybe the history of those phrases and the context and what you actually are communicating, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to just chat with some friends out in Livermore. Just about all of this. Black Lives Matter. As a phrase, those three words really came to prominence in 2014. After around the time Michael Brown, was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri. And I know a lot of people know Ferguson, Missouri. They know Michael Brown. But that's around the time in 2014 when those three words put together really started to make its way around the country. And then for the next couple of years, really culminating in 2016 when Colin Kaepernick really started taking a knee, against police brutality. Those 2 years were really pivotal. And so when people started saying Black Lives Matter, I know initially, right out the gate, there were a lot of I don't know if I should say a lot, but there were some well-intentioned people that were like, no, all lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because like in theory, of course, all lives do matter, especially like us as Christians. If we are to follow Jesus, like we of course are to believe that all lives matter. So I know that there was a certain section of the population in 2014, maybe through 2016, that genuinely were like, no, like, all lives matter. Of course they do. But what people need to understand is that Black Lives Matter stemmed from the fact that Black lives do not matter.
Yeah.
That's really where it originated. So at no point in this conversation, I'm not even gonna say a debate, and at no point in this conversation have we said Black Lives Matter more, Black lives are the only
Instead,
lives that matter. Instead, like none of that was the case. It was all about equality. It
it's
was all
almost
about
like a
equity.
comma also,
Oh yeah, yeah,
as
absolutely.
well as much.
For sure. So you can go back and like in the history and like you are 100, you are not able to find a single time in American history where Black lives have mattered, period. And I know there's some people who say like, well, what about Obama? Well, you can also look at the rise of white nationalism that happened from the very second that they
Oh, on
announced
the
that he was going to be
birther
the next
debate,
president. Exactly.
debate's the wrong word. The birther conspiracy lie,
Yes.
and
Oh,
accusing him of being a Muslim and like minimizing his Americanness from the jump, and you can't
yes.
separate that from the color of his skin.
Correct. From the jump, that's what it was. So, really in American history, you can't find a single period where Black lives have mattered. So now here in 2014, we were saying, no, Black lives matter. And I think I know for me personally, and a lot of Black people feel this, like oftentimes we just get dismissed from the outset. I know there's been times in my life where acquaintances, friends, family, whomever, I've brought up some of my feelings in terms of like, hey, I know something you said, I know you didn't mean it to come across this way, but this is how it came across. And I know I have been dismissed outright. So again, Black Lives Matter in the response of All Lives Matter was just a complete dismissal of really the entire argument. And it's interesting now because you're starting to see, some prominent people from Drew Brees, I think Randy Orton, a wrestler, this morning came out and said like, I understand what they mean now. And it's like, "Oh, okay, thank you for being here. I appreciate it, but you do have to understand, like, our message has been simple from day one.
A
Like,
hundred
we
percent.
haven't tailored any of it. So I think people are starting to come around to it, but yeah, that's where it comes from. And then you have like the whole Blue Lives Matter too, which like, of course, like I'm in such a unique predicament because I, I hate when people are like, oh, I have a black friend, but I will say say it. My best friend growing up, police officer. The best man at my wedding, police officer. And so when I say these like Black Lives Matter, I know that there's a certain section of people that are like, well, like, no, blue lives matter. It's like, well, I'm not saying a no. I'm just saying like certainly like we all do. But at the same time, from Black Lives, like I can't take off the skin. I just
Yeah.
can't. This is who I am. So wherever I
Yeah.
go, and regarding like blue lives, of course, if you're a police officer, a black man, like whatever, like I believe you have the right to life. Like I don't want to see anybody lose their lives. But there is a distinction because like, you know, when it comes to blue lives, like you are able to take that off. And additionally, you have authority over others. You know, so when it comes like the whole like no blue lives matter, it's like we're not saying they don't. I'm not saying they don't because I believe that they do. At the same time, you have to understand the context of this conversation. At no point have we put ourselves above others.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get to equality.
Yeah, we weren't even trying to debate. We weren't trying to start a fight. We were trying to, and I would say we, I'm sort of, probably shouldn't say we here.
Yeah.
The point, what I hear from folks is that we were just trying to assert the same level of value that we already see America reinforcing and building structures around for y'all. That's all
Mhm.
we're saying. And it's hard for me to separate all lives matter folks from what I mentioned earlier, which is that sort of rose-colored view of what American racial justice has already, what the work that American racial justice has already accomplished, because it almost seems to be this like assertion, like, no, everything is fair, everything is good, we all matter, we're all the same. That's already true, which
Mhm.
inherently is contradicting, minimizing the experience that Black Americans are trying to tell us, trying to
Mhm.
say, no, no, this is what our life is like right now. You might not realize it, but things are structured so that our lives don't matter as much as your lives. Again, I'm speaking on behalf of people that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And so, and then what comes back at them is like, no, all lives matter. You're already there. What are you complaining about? And
Mhm.
it's this gaslighting process, which is basically saying, no, 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 your lived experience isn't true. This is America, the land of the
Yes.
free, the home of the brave, and everything's beautiful and perfect here. And
Right.
then, and sort of like, and then you, a lot of times you hear like the same folks, and maybe we could digress into this a little bit, is like, and maybe I don't want to spend too much time on this because this would actually be directly addressing the trolls. But a lot of times that comes with, and if you don't like it, well, then you can leave. And if you don't,
Oh,
it's
cool.
sort of like,
Yes.
if you're denying the America that I think is the real America, well, then you can go find somewhere else to live.
For sure, for sure. And I'll, you know, kind of digress on this point too. Like I, by no means is this historical data or any kind of data. It's just like in terms of what I've seen, I've never seen somebody post Blue Lives Matter and have them responded to by saying, well, no, all lives matter. Like
Mm-hmm.
personally, I've never, ever, ever seen that. But I've seen and I've experienced me saying
Yeah,
Black Lives
totally.
Matter and getting the no, all lives matter or no, blue lives matter. It's like, so that I think is just an interesting juxtaposition that I've seen, which is a whole nother topic. But anyway, just
But it feels to me
something to
like
think about.
there's two options for like what could be going on in people's brains. And the friendliest one is what I mentioned earlier, which is no, 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 you don't realize how great it already is. Can you
Mhm.
please just open your eyes to how wonderful America already is? Which is false, but it's not as bad as the second alternative. And the second alternative is something about you claiming equality with me threatens me.
Mhm.
Something about that doesn't feel right to me, and you should be grateful. You should be happy for what you have, and
Mhm.
you should kind of stay where you are and quit making so much noise.
It
And
is, and it really goes back to, you know, even slave periods where there were certain slaves that, like, you know, were in like the bigger quarters, you know, of the homes, and maybe got like the better portions of food, and like even now, no, Latasha
or like
Morrison in
house
her book.
versus field. Yeah,
Exactly, all those different
yeah,
things, and like there were these people who were kept in slavery, quite frankly, but they didn't have it as bad as those people. I know even me, like I've, you know, I saw family members the other day say like, well, like, you know, things are better than they were in the '60s. It's like it's this whole thing of like, you know, like, well, be grateful for where we are right now, and let us come around to it when we feel comfortable about it. And civil discourse has never been about like your comfort, quite frankly.
Oh, dude, yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the videos that somebody sent in to sort of say, hey, you told us to do our own research. I found this video, and one of the guys in the video is basically, and maybe why don't we talk about this? I want to talk about conflating progress with completion, um, which is like sort of what you just referenced. But he in the video he basically says, like, I'm going to get the stats a little bit wrong, but it's like in the 1950s only 12% of Americans thought that interracial marriage was okay, and now 84% of, or 85% of Americans think that interracial marriage is okay. And he kind of said, like, see? And I was just like, can we talk about what a terrifying indictment of American culture that is? Because what you're saying is 1 in 6 Americans, Ryan, doesn't think that your marriage, which is an interracial marriage, is okay. 1 in 6. So look around, go to any public place. And I'm not saying this isn't statistically, it doesn't work this way. Like, you can't just find 6 people and go, I know for sure one of you is not okay with this. But I do, but it helps you if you go to, like, if you're in the line, the drive-through at In-N-Out, and just go, okay, there's 24 cars. If 4 of those cars thought that it wasn't okay for a black man and a white woman, or a black woman and a white man to get married, would I think that we've made it or could I imagine that there's still some deep-seated racism? And it's like, of course. And folks do the same thing with Oprah, or they do the same thing with Barack Obama, or they do the same thing with athletes, LeBron, like people that have made it and made lots of money. They take, it's called survivorship bias, where you try to create a whole narrative out of the one exceptional example. Or there's the person you hear folks talk, even black folks will talk about, like, yeah, I made it out, and here's why, and here's how. And it creates this narrative of, like, all it takes is hard work, which feeds that white person narrative of, oh yeah, America, personal responsibility, pull yourself up by your bootstrap, the American dream. It fits really neatly in that psyche. And so they want to believe, they hear it and they go, yes, that's what I want to be true.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it's not true. Especially like, let's talk about Black culture. Like, there's this code. Again, this isn't scientific, but this is one of those, one of those things you have to, or you more understand if you're relatively familiar with hood culture, or like, like Black culture, like when in like rough neighborhoods. Like, I'll use like Derrick Rose, for example. So Derrick Rose, current basketball player, point guard, played for the Chicago Bulls. When he was coming up in Chicago, he grew up in South Side of Chicago, which I'm sure a lot of people hear of when they reference, Chicago crime. He was right in the thick of it. And, he is somebody who made it, it out. But one of the reasons he made it out is because there was a culture within some of these neighborhoods to protect those who have the best opportunity to get out, in part so they can come back and lift up the entire neighborhood. So like, that's an entire like culture within like some of these like really, really rough neighborhoods, to take care of their own so they can get out and help them, because nobody else is coming to help them. So even those who have quote unquote made it, the entire code in terms of how they even made it to begin with is so messed up, quite frankly. So yeah, it's just so when people talk about like, those who bypass it, and even me, like, I'm sitting in my own home, and sometimes I sit in this backyard and I'm still like, I can't believe I own this. This is crazy. And I think there are people in my life who, probably think that like I beat racism. To be clear, I've never had anybody say that specifically, but at the same time, when I'm driving, no matter what car I'm in, like I'm still subject to any of the same fears that a lot of Black people have. If I'm out shopping, if I'm in the grocery store, if I walk out with anything, like I'm subject to the same glares that anybody would get elsewhere. So there is no beating racism. It's not like I hit, what was that code back in the day? It was like up, up, down, down, like whatever. It's not like
ABAB, start, select. Yeah. Konami code.
Yeah. You don't click that and you go like, voila, Ryan, you beat racism. Like, now feel free to go about your life unharmed. That's not a thing for us. So no matter where you are, we still are subject to the same discrimination that anybody else is.
No, and you see that too. I even see it when, an athlete will speak out about something, or, anybody who's achieved success will speak out about something. it's almost like oh no, you made it so you don't get to complain, and it's not real because your life is great and you have more than me, and actually I'm kind of jealous and threatened by the fact that you have more than me, but that's a
Yeah.
conversation for another day. But then the people that are still, in the south side of Chicago or in Livermore or in wherever, that like
Hmm.
haven't made it to whatever degree that we're talking about,
Hmm.
we're not hearing a lot of those voices. And so it's basically like the people with the platform don't get to say anything because they're lucky, and they should feel lucky and keep their mouth shut. And
Yeah.
then the people without a platform, we don't hear their voices. So whose voices are we supposed to hear here?
Yeah, it's all just a version of trying to mute the entire conversation because it makes people feel uncomfortable, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
hit it head on. Like if you're poor, like you can't dive in because like you don't know what success feels like. If you're success, like you've got that success, from means that should allow you to bypass it or not be upset. Like if you're LeBron,
Or
if
just be
you are
grateful.
approaching, oh yeah, if you're approaching
Yeah.
like billionaire status, like like LeBron James, another NBA player, I'm a huge basketball fan. That's a lot of my references. It's like, well, you made your money from Nike and from McDonald's and from all these different things that have like white people on their boards and all these things. It's like, yeah, I still got a voice though, and
Hmm.
I can still speak about these issues because I grew up in it. I've got a lot of friends that are still in it. And it's a bad faith argument to just get the issue to go away. That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that speaks to the core of a lot of the pushback that you'll see here is like what's really like the heart of this thing is that it makes me so uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
some of that will be very personal. Like I don't want to confront the idea that somehow generationally I have benefited from this structural injustice. And that's I think a very deep core level part of what's going on. And also it's just like, wait, I thought we were done talking about this. I thought we did it. And I don't, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it. Everybody just fights. And so it's kind of
Yeah.
like MLK has that amazing quote about a negative piece versus a positive piece, where he says we're pursuing a positive piece, which is the presence of justice, versus a negative piece, which is the absence of conflict. And
Hmm.
sometimes I see white folks pursuing that absence of conflict, where it's just like, well, can't we just talk about something else? Can't we just, even like people that aren't actively, you know, uh, trying to hold the movement back or whatever, are just like, yeah, but do we have to fight so much about it? Do we have to talk so much about it? Can we just, and to me, I see a lot of that same energy coming from folks who might really in good faith, and I mentioned this at the top, but I want to talk about it a little bit more here, say like, no, I don't really see color. I treat everybody the same, with the same love and the same.
Hmm.
Some people will do it in bad faith, but genuinely, I see a lot of people who they actually don't understand um, maybe what they're saying. And the empathy that I have for them is that as a culture, this conversation has progressed, and I actually think there were pretty dominant voices in culture in the 80s and 90s that
Hmm.
were saying, no, 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 we're past all this.
Yeah, you're right.
And so they heard that and they went, oh, okay, this is, even like a well-meaning white person is like, oh, okay, this is how we're supposed to, this is what we're supposed to say. We're not even really supposed to talk about race. And I was having
Hmm.
a conversation with someone very close to me who was saying, I even remember when you weren't even allowed to like reference somebody's race. Like that wasn't like when we were playing pickup basketball, you wouldn't say, all right, I got the black dude, you got the white dude.
Yeah.
Like even that was like, no, 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 don't say that. And it's all
Uh-huh.
of a piece with, we don't even talk about race because we're sort of past it. And so
Uh-huh.
can you just talk a little bit, Ryan, about what, I don't know, maybe even if someone means well by that, which I think a lot, I know people in my life that do mean well by that, why that's not far enough?
For sure, for sure. I love the colorblind conversation for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I do think that some of it is rooted in genuine goodness. I think there are some people that just want to see equality across the board, and they use that as colorblind. Which, like, I don't know. Like, I certainly don't want to say like that's fine because I think we can still do better. It's funny. A friend of mine actually on one of my posts a couple of weeks ago, he had something. He was a white dude, and I love the guy, and he had said something relating to being like colorblind, and I was like, I don't want to blast the guy like on Facebook. That's not my goal. So I responded, and just like how we need to accept it, and this and that. a friend of mine who didn't know him, and is very much on the same page when it comes to, as I am when it comes to just like the whole, like, don't say you're colorblind. She had kind of like lit him up, and I was like, but hey, I mean, like you said was accurate.
Yeah.
But and anyway, I just stayed out of it. I was like, I'm thinking those two. But yeah, so being colorblind, it's seeing color is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're, and I'll just at the basic level, if you are driving down the road and if you see a red light and a green light, it's good to understand those differences. And same thing if our kids are approaching the oven. If sorry, this thing is flying over. If our
Got
kids
Ryan in the middle of
see,
a hurricane here.
I know,
Ryan, you
yeah,
look
that's
like
gonna be,
that right now. You're like that news reporter who's like coming to you live and stuff's like blowing behind. He's in this big jacket.
yeah, from my own backyard. Yeah, I'm just hoping
Yeah.
yeah, should be good. Anyway, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, sweet. Yeah, if our kids are approaching the oven and the oven on the top is bright, bright, bright red, we want them to understand that seeing color is good, because if you don't see color, you might touch it. And if you say like, oh, well, all surfaces are the same, you might touch it and like really burn yourself. So seeing color is not a bad thing at all. And when it comes to people, like seeing these differences, it's beautiful, quite frankly. Like if we all are to believe that we are created in
Mm-hmm.
God's image, that means every single one of us, there is something about God's image that is within us as
Mm-hmm.
individuals. So for us
Mm-hmm.
to deny me, you, like our friend down the road, any single person on this earth is to deny an aspect of God. And I
Amen.
don't want to do that. So when it comes to like the whole colorblind, like I want you to see color. More than that, I need you to accept color. I need you to love color. And I
Mm-hmm.
need you to fight against those who want to hate on color. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's really what it comes down to. So
Yeah.
that's really where I stand there. And there's a really good book by a woman named Jennifer Harvey called what is it? Something about white kids. Yeah. Oh,
Great title.
raising something about white. It's called Raising White Kids. And I'm actually reading it because my daughters are a quarter black, and I know they're going to go into some spaces where some people don't think that they are like at all black, and I want them to grow up with the understanding of really a lot of these issues from a place of privilege, which I think both my daughters are probably going to have an element of.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's just something to really be aware.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that especially in the 60s, the whole colorblind movement was born out of like, let's all just like be equal. And now I
Yeah.
think we know a little bit more than we did 50 years ago. So now let's see it and let's love it.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, totally. And I want to come back to that in a second, but you mentioned your daughter, so I do want to talk about them for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked in the past about how your daughter Reagan, how old is Reagan?
Reagan is 3, almost 4.
Okay, so Reagan is so terrifyingly, mind-bendingly adorable. And like, I don't say this lightly, I legitimately think that Reagan's the cutest kid in my like personal orbit. She's so cute, it's off-putting. She's so adorable. I can't look directly at her. It's like staring at the sun. And so I told you previously that I was really hoping that Sienna, your second, who just turned 1 yesterday or day before,
Yeah, yesterday.
That Sienna was an Uggo, because you deserve that, because you already have one. And I looked at the photos you posted yesterday and I was like, come on, how is she still so beautiful? No, you have unfairly cute children. Anyway, though, back to colorblindness.
I appreciate that. Shout out to Allie for that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm realizing as I sit with that conversation around colorblindness and I don't see color, is that there's something uniquely pernicious and sort of like low-key harmful about white folks who traditionally, and you sort of have to accept this as just a fact of American history, have been in the driver's seat as a race from the beginning of American history, and frankly some other countries as well, but at the beginning of American history, now basically saying, okay, we're going to give you your civil rights, we're going to give you some semblance of equality here, but now we're not going to talk about color anymore, because even that sort of reinforces we basically say so many of the things that we've created as a culture are created out of whiteness. And now we're even going to remove the whiteness from those things and just say that
Hmm.
they're good. They're just good
Hmm.
and they're part of America. And
Hmm.
that's part of what like reinforces like low key white supremacy, which
Hmm.
is saying, no, there's no color, there is no difference. Just all the things we've created are just, they're just good. They're just American. They're just, and so don't try to be different. Don't try to show me anything that's different.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, especially when it comes to history. I think right now, like we're seeing it with a lot of people who are like pushing to tear down the Confederate statues, which I am 100% for.
yeah, same.
But you have a lot of people that are like, don't take away our history. And it's like, well, here's the thing: like we haven't been taught all of history, like, and that's the biggest thing. It's like, yeah, if you want to leave that up, like, okay, like understand what the Confederacy stands for in terms of succeeding from this country that a lot of people love. But I digress from that point.
Yeah, let's put a
Um,
plaque. Let's leave that statue up. Let's put a plaque next to it that says, "This man, blah blah blah, whoever this guy was,
yeah.
hated the idea that Black people were human beings so much that he was willing to die and lead thousands of other people into their deaths and leave the country that he was born into just to make sure that he and other people he knew could still own Black people. Here's this guy. Do whatever you want
Mhm.
to this statue."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I mean, but we don't learn all of American history, and like I am a firm believer in understanding all of it, but it's a lot of it is cherry picked, quite frankly, and quite frankly, not only because like textbooks and history books are written predominantly by white folks, but because like Black people don't have an account of those history because A, we weren't listened to in the 17,
Yeah.
1800s, early 1900s, even now, but B, because like they wouldn't even teach us how to read or write or anything like that. So like in terms of recorded history, like we don't have a lot of it, quite frankly. Like we were listed as livestock, or we were listed
Mhm.
right next to livestock when it comes to a lot of those records of who we even were. My mom actually, she a couple years ago was doing, and my mom is white, so I'm half Black. And my mom was doing research on like on her side of the family. I don't know if it was through one of those like genealogy websites, and like she went back and she was able to trace her family history or our family history back to like I want to say the 1700s, something crazy,
Hmm.
maybe even the 1600s. It was a long time. And then she tried to do my stepdad, who was Black. She tried to do his side of the family, and it like stopped at like early 1900 or maybe like or like late 1800s because they just didn't keep those records. So in terms of just like whole history perspective, a lot of our history doesn't exist. So if you want to teach history, learn history, great, learn all of it.
Yeah, exactly. Which speaks to where we started this whole thing, which is we've told ourselves a story of who we are, of who America is, and that trickles so deeply into our identity that
Hmm.
confronting these things feels like refuting things that I've already accepted as a part of our American identity, when in actuality there's a mythology of America that continues to this day that's reinforced by a million structures and a million systems that tell us that we're the greatest country on earth. And basically, yeah, we made some little mistakes in the past, but we're past those now, and America's great and amazing. and
Hmm.
and that's part and parcel of why I see a gut emotional reaction um, from white people when Black folks are speaking out and saying no, prophetically saying this is what the world, this is the world as it is, and this is the world as how it has been, and this is why this is unacceptable.
Hmm.
Is you see like white folks like, no, why aren't you grateful to be a part of this amazing thing? And then you see Black folks saying, do you not realize that this thing has never been amazing for me?
Yeah,
like
correct.
like how do you not, if it had been amazing for me, do you think I would be out in these streets? Do you think I'm just bored
Hmm.
protesting? Like, do you think
Hmm.
I just don't have anything better to do? Like, do you think I
Hmm.
like being out here? And no, like I'm trying
Yeah.
to tell you that your reality and my reality are different, and
Hmm.
it's
Correct.
whether or not you believe that doesn't change anything about my reality. So I'm going to tell my story, and I'm going to keep telling it until my reality changes.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Yep. Yep.
and I think part of that too, I only want to talk about this just for a minute, but I have seen some emails and just in some conversations with folks who are telling their story, and they're basically saying, hey, you know, sometimes it's I'm a black man or I'm a black woman or whatever, or more often than that, it's no, my best friend is, or my business partner is, or whatever.
Hmm.
And we've never encountered any systemic racism. And it's given as a refutation. It's given as a like,
Hmm.
no, 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 you guys are missing it. Actually, it's great.
Hmm.
And so there's this tendency, and then sometimes there are some people online that are making videos that go viral, which is just basically saying, hey, here's the thing, here's an explanation that doesn't make you actually challenge or think about anything. It's
Hmm.
just you get to keep going the way you were going. And maybe that's from a black person, or specifically a black woman, or maybe it's from somebody else, but can you talk about like uh what it means to have discernment, what it means to like hear from the majority of experiences, and how to not over personalize the issue? And I don't know, I want to hear sort of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's almost like one of those things where this is going to be a terrible reference, so I apologize in advance. But like if you if you're looking for like a great restaurant to take your wife on a date, and you come across this place, I'm not gonna, I don't like Yelp. It's a whole personal thing. But if you come across this place that has like 4.5 stars, 1,000 reviews, 4.5 stars, it's like on average, I was like, that's pretty solid,
Yeah.
But then if you find one 1 star review that's like, this place was terrible, I had such a bad experience, blah blah blah. It's like that, maybe that's the case, but that doesn't negate like a
The
1,000 other
overwhelming majority.
5 star reviews. Yeah, for sure. It's like, all right, cool, like that's valid. And same thing on the opposite end. Like I get, like if you want to take your wife out to great anniversary dinner, and she hops on whatever and sees it's a 0.5 star or 1 star, and she's like, well, why would you take me here? But you're like, but look at this one review. This one
Yeah.
review is 5 star. Like they said it's awesome, and they treat white people exceptional. It's like, whoa, wait, I don't know.
Hmm.
So again, like you have to look at the consensus. And I work in HR. I've worked in HR for 7-8 years, and the whole thing is about like, if you step back, does it make sense? So
Hmm.
I see it. I'm not going to say the person's name, but like you see some of these videos that go viral. Somebody that might look like me who's saying the exact opposite of what I'm saying right now. And even right before this call, I hopped on social media and I saw this one person I will not name.
Hmm.
Their video was posted, and I look at who posted it, and it was not somebody that looked like me.
Hmm.
So it's really tough, because I think some of us are sought out, and quite frankly, in some circles, like there is literal money to be made
I was
if
just
you
gonna
look
say
like,
that, dude.
yeah,
It's
if
very
you look like
lucrative.
me. Oh, for sure. And like, I don't want to get too much into people's incomes, because it's is what it is, but like it's lucrative to look like me and say the opposite of what I'm saying right now, which is really, really
Get a lot of clicks,
unfortunate.
you're going to
And
get a lot of shares, because
for sure.
it's like what white person lizard brain wants to hear, which is no, 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 everything's fine. All these black folks are just ungrateful, or all of them have just been lied to, or all of them are just have a victim complex, or all of them, whatever
Hmm.
explanation you can give that lets white people go, oh, okay, good. That's not my fault. I don't have to do anything.
Hmm.
The white folks want that so badly right now that anything that will give them that is going to go viral.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so,
and there were some, like I know, I'm probably even been like generalizing things like that, but I had a family member who posted that video, and every time he posts something, I'm wondering, like, do you understand that like your nephew is black? Like, do you see me? And he doesn't, which is,
like, we've met,
what,
right? You see
yeah,
this?
like, yeah. And it's really sad for a number of reasons, but yeah, he posted like that video too. And I just want to say, like, all right, cool, well, let me, your nephew, give you a totally different perspective, like that might not fit your narrative. Like, which one are you going to believe? Like the one that fits your narrative or not? And again, if everybody's saying it, then like fine. If everybody thinks that, like, like we're playing the victim, like, okay, but we're not. And so just one person saying it, or two people saying it, or a tiny, tiny section of people saying that, does not speak for the overwhelming majority of us over a 400-year period.
I think what you're
Period.
talking about, dude, you're talking about discernment. You're talking about like how do I seek wisdom in the middle of this? And how do
Hmm.
I like listen well? And how do I listen with empathy? And it's in a weird way, it's like when you're in an argument with somebody, or like maybe a significant other of some kind, and instead of like listening to their heart, you're looking for like the one thing that they like say
Hmm.
wrong. Or like my wife and I, like, this is just me being terrible. I think I'm a little better at this now, but like early in our marriage, I was not good at this, where it's
Hmm.
like she would talk for 3 minutes and make 47 good points about
Hmm.
whatever was going on that we were having conflict over, and then she would say and always or never or whatever, some like overstatement of reality, and then I would
Hmm.
just like pounce on that and then just say, great, let's make the argument about that now. In the same way, it's like I'm going to listen to all of these voices, and then I'm going to find the one that like
Hmm.
says what I wanted to hear, and then I'm going to go, that's the truth, that's the only
Oh, for
thing I'm
sure.
going to hold on to, and that's what I'm going to share.
Yeah, and you'll find that all over. I mean, like even within, like, you can go through the '60s and find a number of, like, anti-protest signs that, like, listed scripture, in terms of the reason that's, I don't know, black and white people shouldn't integrate and shouldn't marry. Like
Hmm.
there's always going to be somebody who finds something to twist it into their belief. Like, for basketball, I'm a diehard Indiana Pacers fan. If I just read Pacers blogs and they, one person said, like, I think we have a good chance to win a championship. If I came to you and said, Kevin, you know what? Pacers are going to win the championship.
I
You'd be
read
like,
this blog.
yeah, like this one person said this.
Yeah.
So like, and
Yeah.
here's the article. Like, check it out. Like, Indiana Pacers with a Z.net.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's believable.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Yeah.
Um, there's a couple more things I want to hit.
Hmm.
One is, uh, so I think that our brains. I talked a little bit how our brains were sort of like wired to accept a narrative. Now we've got a pattern. We're gonna like sort of match everything, and that's like deep, deep, deep in our the way our brains are like biologically wired.
Hmm.
That was sort of the setup for this whole conversation. But there's another thing, and that I see, and I don't know how deeply into like the nooks and crannies of our brain this one goes, but I see it everywhere. So I'm inclined to believe that it sits deeply somewhere in there and feels right. And
Hmm.
that's just like our desire to both sides everything.
Hmm.
Um, and we see it in our politics, where it's like, well, this news site is bad, but also this news site is bad, or this politician
Hmm.
lies, but also this politician lies. And it's a way to create this like false equivalency, where I've made this joke to, a bunch of times. I think I made it to you on the phone the other day, where it's like, yeah, getting kicked in the shin is bad and getting shot in the face is bad. They're
Hmm.
not the same bad.
Hmm.
So it's not like this person lies and also this person lies. It's like, well,
Hmm.
no, like,
Yeah.
yes, but no. And like, I think I see it here as well, in this moment where people, because again, we're so profoundly uncomfortable with confronting a narrative that doesn't sit right with us that we're looking for. And so you're seeing people just like, well, if you're going to talk about, systemic racism, and if you're going to talk about police brutality, and you're going to talk, well, then you got to talk about the way these protesters are acting. When you've got to talk about how they've destroyed property or whatever. And I just want to be super, super clear. I'm not standing here saying,
Hmm.
yay, break windows or light things on fire. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. But
Hmm.
what I am saying is that I am saving all of my outrage, all of it, for the systemic dehumanization of my brothers and sisters.
Hmm.
That's all. I don't have any left. I don't have any left for, oh, but also this is bad. Well, but also I'm not, and that's not me saying it's good. It's me saying I have a limited amount of outrage. I have a limited, we all do, of emotional
Hmm.
capacity. And I know that what my brain wants to do, because part of what that false equivalency does is it allows us to stay exactly where we were at the beginning.
Correct.
So you go, well, this politician's bad, but this politician lies, but this politician lies too. So they're both kind of meh. So I'm just gonna go with the one that I already kind of liked in the first place and not do any hard emotional, logical, relational work to like get to maybe something a little bit messier, but a little bit truer place on one side or
Hmm.
the other, or
Yeah.
with what news channel I watch or whatever. And so in this moment, I'm seeing people go, well, yeah, there are some cops that are doing some bad things, but the protests are doing some bad things too. So you know what? I'm really just sad about all of it. And it's like, no, that's not the place. That's not the place to land. The place to land
Hmm.
is, like I said, like when when someone in power, Derek Chauvin, can do what he did to George Floyd, or what the officers with Rashad Brooks, or a million other like stories that are happening right now in real time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when power and systems of power are exerting that power to dehumanize people that I love, that you love, that we should all love. And in the process, it's like denigrating what America was supposed to be and never really has been. That's
Mm-hmm.
where we should be aiming all of our outrage. And so when I see, first of all, 99.99999% of these protests are just beautiful and peaceful and powerful and inspiring. But when I see people out in the streets, I'm like, that's what they're mad about. And honestly, that's what I should be mad about. And I shouldn't really
Yeah.
save anything for the few people that are whatever going too far.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, it's such an interesting topic because like there is such a need to both sides of everything. I think a lot of people are going through it. I think you know, I think there's even like some churches that are going through it because like they don't want to come across as like, you know, taking favor on one side or the other. Like I think there's some certain people that know that, look, oh man, the systemic issue is like an issue. This is systemic racism is an issue, but I don't want to alienate any like, you know, our law enforcement crowd or anything like that. And I get that. I'm sympathetic to it because like I never want anyone to feel alienated, like point blank. That being said, when it comes to like, you know, this whole, you know, thing, my wife and I, we were actually asked by our church to do this whole like hot topics conversation. And one of the questions that we got was like, you know, how do we love on both police officers and protesters? And I like really, I took a second and looked at the question and I was like, oh my God, like what are they trying to get at? Like, is it, what's the root of this question? And, you know, and I'm trying to come from like a biblical standpoint as well. And, you know, so I did some research, looked through the Bible and looked to see what it said. And like God obviously gives like authority, you know, to certain people for a reason. And like, so if you're in a place of authority, you know, like, you know, God may have placed you there for a reason. Now, that being said, I think off the top of my head, I don't know like the chapter, but in Ezekiel, they talk about the shepherd and the flock. And like it clearly states, you know, to the shepherd, like if the flock like has gone astray, if the flock is lost, essentially, if the flock is not doing well, shepherd, that's on you. And so that's how I look at like that authority versus, I don't know, or law enforcement versus protesters. Like I have never sworn. Well, I am actually a parks commissioner, so I have been sworn in by the city of Vacaville for for being a parks commissioner. But as a Black human being, I have never taken an oath to be Black, to, you know, do anything, anything. Period. But like if you're in a position of authority, you have something over the others. So I've always seen it as like it's not necessarily equals. Like of course I don't want anyone to lose their lives at all, but we don't have the ability to really like get the other people like in trouble where they 100% have the ability to get us in trouble. And again, you can go through 400 years and see a history of Black folks being incarcerated over the tiniest, pettiest things. And right now
Or
there's
imaginary things. Yeah.
Exactly. And quite frankly, like there are so many wrongful convictions. I think there have been 1,900 wrongful convictions since 1989. There's been a number
That we know about.
that we know about. Yeah, the Equal Justice Initiative, which I know a lot of people have seen. Just Mercy. You know, that individual, Brian, I forget his last name. He himself has led over 140. He turned over, you know, 140 convictions. So there's a number of issues there. And to get back on the point, because I'm kind of rambling now, is that it isn't both sides because both sides aren't equal. Like there is clearly one side that has power over the other. And it'd almost be like, I don't know, like if my daughter was upset with something I did and I said like, well, like, you know, you really hurt me as well. Like I have authority over my daughter. So if she says something hurtful to me and I completely obliterate her day, like those two aren't equal because I have power over her in that situation. So it's not two human beings in a disagreement, it's authority versus someone who's under that authority. And the same thing goes with law enforcement, and that has to be understood. That has to be understood. I'm not saying, a friend of mine actually walking with me on this like 25-mile protest walk that I did. She was a police officer, and she had told me this was the night before. She was in Vallejo and had like a Molotov cocktail thrown at her as a police officer, and my heart broke because she
Yeah,
is such a
that's
sweet
terrible.
person. Oh,
It's
for sure, I've
terrible.
known her forever, and it really my heart broke in that instant. And whoever threw that, probably not a great person. I don't care what you're out there for. Like you're probably not a great person if you're throwing those things at other people. Um, and it really hurt my heart on a lot of different levels. At the same time, like I would hope that people don't use that to completely dismantle my entire argument in terms of why we
A
are
hundred
fighting for
percent.
equal justice
A
because
hundred
one,
percent.
idiot threw
Idiot.
that. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's I want to do one more, and this is the one that uh eats at me the most when I see
Mhm.
it. Um and so I want to sort of set it up, and then I'll Ryan, obviously I want you to jump in as well, but sometimes I see people, and these are the people, I think there are a few of the things we've talked about today that I really do think you can do in good faith. Just not understanding what's going on here. This
Yeah.
one is harder to imagine that happening. I want to try to extend grace. And so maybe, but it's harder to understand. So it's mostly like I'm talking to the folks that are reading when these things will get posted by other people
Mhm.
and think, oh, wait, is
Mhm.
that a good point or not? And I want to sort of lay that out. And that's when um, someone will jump into one of these conversations about systemic racism, and it'll say like, hey, it'll start with like real facts that matter, which is like, hey, did you know that black people are almost 3 times as likely, 2.87 times as likely to be killed by police officers than white people, per capita. And
Mhm.
did you know that here's black household wealth versus white household wealth, and look, it's
Mhm.
like 10x different. And here's all these things where it's like, look, there's problems in the system and we need to figure it out together, and we need to make changes, and then someone will come in and they'll cite like stats about black on black violence, or they'll cite stats about black fatherlessness,
Mhm.
or they'll cite stats about black abortion rates. That's usually in the Christian community specifically. Someone will jump in and
Mhm.
say something like that. Or other stats were basically like, hey, here's a statistic that puts black people in a really, paints them really in a really negative light. And what it either outright says or implies is like, no, 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 the problem is on that side. And when they
Mhm.
go clean up their problems, then they'll get to participate in the wonderful America that the rest of us have. And so I don't want to go down this too far, but I want to just like lay out like a logic tree for you in your brain. And so this is what works for me. It's like, hey, people group that is not me is doing something I don't understand, or doing something different than me, or whatever. That's the beginning. And so then it's like, um, do I believe that they are doing this for internal reasons, because they are physically, biologically different than me, or do I believe that they're doing it for external reasons?
Mhm.
And if you believe that they're doing it for internal reasons, that's the literal definition of racism. You believe that
Mhm.
they are biologically different and inferior to you in some way. And if that's what
Mhm.
you believe, please don't go to our church anymore. I can't say that more definitively. If you genuinely believe that Ryan, and I don't really think there are hardly any people in our church that think that. I need to believe that in order to fellowship with these people. But if you genuinely look at Ryan and you think in some way he's biologically inferior to me, you are so far out of touch with the heart of God. Honestly, go find somewhere else. I don't think I need to believe that almost nobody at our church feels that way. So therefore, the other option is that there are external forces in some way acting on this group of people that causes the group of people to act in a certain way. And I think it's important to think about this in groups, not in individuals, because sometimes we get caught up on an individual story and we say, well, why did that person make bad choices? And that
Mhm.
person may have made bad choices. Like 100%, they may have made bad choices, and they bear responsibility for the choices they make. But when we back up and we look at the group as a whole, then we can start seeing what larger forces, when you can sort of abstract it a little bit, how those are at play. So then if you go, oh, I believe there are external forces acting on this group, well, welcome. because that's what we're saying when we're talking about systemic racism, structural issues. That is what we are talking about, which is that there are bigger external forces acting. So I think what folks don't realize, and we could talk about what those forces might be, we're going to talk about them more over the course of the series, but it's everything from government policy to the stories we tell in our media, both our like fictionalized media and our news media, to the way we're handling schooling, to the way implicit bias affects the workplace and hiring. I mean, there's a million rabbit holes that we could go down here, but that's what we're talking about, is that there are external forces. And so to sum up what I'm saying, when you cite the output, right, which is black on black crime or whatever, which, to be clear, white on white crime, most groups hang out with each other. So most good things happen between the same race, and most bad things happen between the same race. There's more white on white crime than there is white on Latino crime. And there's more Latino on Latino, of course, because we all hang out with each other. Anyway, without getting too far down that rabbit hole, when you cite the output without thinking about the inputs, what you are doing, maybe if you don't even realize it, or if you don't spend the time thinking about it, is you are engaging in outright racism, which is these people are acting a certain type of way because they are different or inferior in some way to me.
Yeah, when it comes to a lot of those different things, like structurally, it's so baked into the fabric of our DNA as a country. It's like it's tough to identify where like our foundation began and where like the systemic racism begins, because it's all like intertwined, quite frankly, like going back 1776 and even prior to that, 1619. It's I go back and forth. Like there's a family member who actually the other day, I stayed out of this argument, trying not to get too much into the Facebook weeds, but he had referenced black on black crime, and said like, well, this is happening in black neighborhoods, and then the very next sentence was, we just, once we all start treating each other the same and stop seeing color, like we can move past it. And I couldn't wrap my mind around the game of Twister that like he had to do to say like black on black crime, but don't see color. It's like, well, which is it? Which is it? And even within like churches, like we don't love to hear this. And again, I haven't researched this, but Latasha Morrison of Be the Bridge is somebody I really trust, and I trust her data. She mentions in her book that 92, I think she said 92.8, or maybe it's just 92% of churches in America are segregated. And when I heard that stat, I was listening to an audiobook. I literally had to pause and go like, did I just hear that correctly? Like 92%? And
I think MLK said the most segregated place in America is our church.
I believe it.
Because we have like majority white churches and we have majority black churches. And I think there's a way they sort of define where it's like unless there's a certain threshold, that like, it's not, to be clear, I think, Ryan, I don't want to step on your point, but you're not saying we don't let black people in.
No,
we don't let white. It's saying, no, 90% of the church is, or whatever, I don't remember the exact number, it's overwhelmingly white, or it's overwhelmingly black.
For sure.
We've done that in our churches.
Yeah, like I'd say like the church I go to is like overwhelmingly white. Like they still let me in, which is cool.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't, anyway, so thank you for clarifying that. But with that, it really shows that there's such an underlying issue. And even now, like this conversation that we're having, and Kevin, you and I have known each other for a year. So like it's different, but I'm seeing, especially within Christian spaces, a lot of black people showing up on some of these feeds. And I'm just wondering, I'm like, is there like a retainer fee that like, that some of these people are getting paid to just say like, like, oh, racism in America, it's in the news again. Let me call up so-and-so and let's have a conversation. Let me call up so-and-so, and even very recently, last night, I don't know when people are watching this, but last night, I get on Twitter, I see Lecrae. Lecrae is a trending topic. And
Lecrae's same. Can you tell us about who Lecrae is real quick?
Yeah, Lecrae is probably one of the most popular Christian rappers.
He's got to be number one. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine. Certainly when I see him, I like him. I'm like, oh, cool. Like Lecrae's a trending topic. And I go on to see why he's a trending topic. And I'm like, Oh no.
Uh,
And it was because he was in a conversation, much like we're having right now. But the white pastor who he was chatting with, I guess he was like a mega church. I didn't know who he was, but he had referred to white privilege as a white blessing. And again, do your own research. I haven't done enough to probably even like tell the story, but he had referenced the fact that like maybe slavery like created some blessings that we're not necessarily like talking about in terms of the foundation of this country. And I felt really bad because the trending topic wasn't that pastor that said that. It was Lecrae, black man, for not defending it or not saying anything. And even right before we're actually filming this, I saw on Instagram that like Lecrae put out like a
did
video
you watch
statement
it? I
saying,
watched it right
I
before we recorded.
yeah, same here, same
Yeah.
here. And but just even the fact that like he had to get out there and apologize for being in such an uncomfortable position that he didn't know what to say, like just really, I don't know, I felt bad for him. At the same time, I just thought about all the times in my life, whether it be at work or personal life, where I was not in a position to really light somebody up, if you will. Like when somebody
Hmm.
says something incredibly dumb like that pastor did. I can think of times at work, like I said, I worked in HR, and we've been in review boards talking about all these different people. And I've been in front of my bosses, colleagues, everybody, and somebody says something that has racial undertones in terms of why the person doesn't deserve a raise. And I've had to bite my tongue or like figure out a different way to say it without saying like, that was a racist.
Yeah, I
That
know,
was,
right?
and like, and not
Because
embarrass
nothing
the
puts a
person because
white
that,
person on their back foot like that was race. Oh no, of course not. Me?
exactly.
No.
Yes. And the only person, it's a
Racism
lose
exists as
lose.
an idea. It's like out there somewhere,
Hmm.
but it's not in here. Of course not.
Hmm.
Not me.
For sure.
Don't put that on me. Quit making everything about race, Ryan.
For sure. And it's a
Yeah.
lose lose because if Lecrae said what I'm sure he wanted to say, because he's a very brilliant human being, if he said what he probably wanted to say in that moment or like was quicker, I'm sure he was probably off guard. I think in that video he mentions that he was processing and caught off guard. But then he looks bad because then he embarrassed and humiliated like a wealthy privileged white male in front of like a majority white audience. So he loses there. If he doesn't say anything, he loses there. And so many of us, like it's a lose-lose situation. Even in terms of this, like I would imagine that I'm probably speaking to a majority of white people right now. Like me personally, like the only thing that I have to gain or that we as a black culture have to gain is equality, is the same rights that everybody else already has. Like that's all I have to gain from this conversation. I'm doing this because I love you, I love Cornerstone, I love humanity, I love Jesus, and like, and I mean, quite frankly, Kevin, I'll talk to you anytime. I
Yeah.
just love talking to you, period. But when you even just think of the baseline of why so many black people are showing up in like all these like white churches, it's because there's so
Totally.
many people that are like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what to do. So black guy, what are your thoughts? And
Yeah. Oh,
it's it's um it's a catch 22 for me because because of that exact issue. And again, I go back to, I'm not gonna say like what would Jesus do, but like I go back to why I'm here. And I'm here because I want to be a part of a diverse church. I'm not here because I want to be the diverse member in the church, because being diverse in oneself is not possible.
hmm.
So all of this, it just allows us to look at where we are as a community, as a culture. You hit it head on, like black on black crime, sure it exists. White on white crime also exists as well. And again, it just, to me, it always seems like bad faith a little bit to just distract from the issue, to really
Yeah.
put a mirror in front of ourselves as a country and as a people and say like, oh, we've done some really messed up things. How do
It's
we atone
fully I'm
for it?
rubber, you're
We
glue.
lament. Exactly. And like
Yeah.
we really like need to lament um all of this, feel all of this so we can move forward. This isn't something that's going to happen even in our lifetime, but we have to take steps to be able to make an impact.
Yeah, dude. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this. I know,
Yeah.
like so many other folks who have been thinking about these things, whether you wanted to or not, for a lot longer than a lot of the rest of us, you're being pulled into, like you just talked about with the Cray. you're being pulled into situations and asked to lend your expertise and your perspective. And in that process, there's pressure put on you to somehow speak for the totality of the Black experience, or translate the Black experience for white folks in a way that's palatable, that they can hear it, that the way, because even what you were just saying earlier with that pastor, that whole moment where he stepped in it came out of him being kind of afraid to say the word white privilege. And so he was trying to think of a new way to say it that white people could hear it. And what he landed on was white blessing, which is problematic in the most obvious ways. I can't believe that he missed. Blessing implies providence from God. How anyway, we don't have to get down that, but
Yeah.
but what's, even in what you were just talking about, it's like, I just want to say I see you in the burden that you're carrying, not only just in your day-to-day life and like the story you told to our congregation during the weekend services, and walking in your own side door and hoping that nobody thinks you're breaking into your own house, but specifically the burden that you're carrying in this moment, which is, not only do I have to process my own emotional experience as I'm watching these videos, as I'm confronting these things in the skin that I'm in, but also I'm somehow still going to find it within me to like reach back and like pull some people along with me in a way that's gracious and inviting without compromising the truth of what you're trying to get across. I can't. I appreciate you so much. I respect you so much. I'm so grateful for you and your leadership on this. And really quick, do you mind, before we go, can you share for just like a minute or two, if you feel comfortable, about what you did after Ahmaud Arbery, and maybe we can sort of leave it with that?
Yeah, so I'll try to give a quick minute recap. When the video of Ahmaud Arbery, being lynched, quite frankly, when it got leaked, and again, like the killing itself happened a couple months prior, but when the video got leaked, I felt such a sense of like, that could have been me. Easily could have
100%.
been me. I am a jogger. I run through my neighborhood. I live in a predominantly white neighborhood, and if just the wrong people came across me and said like, "Hey, we want to stop and ask you some questions," and had shotguns, like, there's not a chance that I'm going to stop and say like, "Yes, sir, let's have a conversation with me and all your
Oh, a
shotguns."
citizen's arrest? Well, I respect your authority. Please.
Exactly. So like all of that just resonated, hit home with me. So I shared a story on just like my Instagram stories, talking about like why that story resonated with me, and that story in itself resonated with a lot of people. And I think because I could be wrong, but I think it's because there was a lot of people that look at me, look at my home, look, I have a good job, look at all these different things, and I think there was a section of people that thought that I had beat a lot of these issues, and again, I don't. So then after that, since the story resonated with people, I was like, how can I keep this going? Because again, this is before George Floyd, so I knew that stories like this happen all the time, and I knew that my story shocked a lot of people. So I committed to 25 days of not only running, just like Ahmaud Arbery did. So I would go out and run morning, night, whatever it was. And then I would post an image of my run along with a story of a different, Black person who has been killed over the time. And I actually threw in a couple white people in there too, because there's been a couple white allies who've been murdered as well for helping Black causes. So anyway, I did that over the course of 24 days. And on the 25th day, I went on a 25-mile solidarity walk, in remembrance of those who walked in Selma, in regards to the original 33 back in 1868, who were Black people expelled from Congress and then marched 25 miles to get their rights back, 12 of whom were killed. So I just wanted to do that, and keep in mind on the 20th day is when George Floyd was killed. So by the time I did my walk, a lot of people thought that it was like took on this whole light. And I'm like, no, I've been protesting this for 25 days because this experience that George Floyd has seen, like we've seen this our entire existence.
Yeah,
It was
absolutely.
exhausting. I'm still drained.
I can't imagine.
But yeah, it was
And
something
you
I
were
really felt
mixing,
compelled to do.
stories like, Emmett Till or whatever, that are a little more historical stories,
Hmm.
with this just happened 2 years ago, or this just, and then just
Hmm.
even the juxtaposition of going, here's a story maybe you've never heard about, the Tulsa Race
Hmm.
Massacre, maybe you've never heard about Rosewood, or maybe you've never, and then also
Hmm.
maybe you've never heard about this thing that happened 3 years ago in
Hmm.
Detroit or
Yeah.
wherever. And I think that was what was part of what was so jarring, is it forces people to reconcile, this isn't over, we're not done with this. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
powerful. And
Well,
I
thank you.
think
I
there were so
appreciate
many
it.
people I saw following along. And maybe just on like one like slightly lighter note, is there a way for folks that you heard Ryan mention Yelp earlier? That's because Ryan, I'm sure Ryan and I've never talked about Yelp, but I assume it's informed by his experience as a small business owner. And can you give us a quick minute on Be Ice Cream or Be Nothing? And is there a way that folks watching this can like support what you guys are doing?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so actually, I own a business here in Vacaville called Be Ice Cream or Be Nothing. Started a couple years ago just to
Which is a
show people
Parks and
how to
Rec
make ice
reference,
cream.
right? Just to be
Oh yeah,
clear.
total Parks and Rec reference. It's my favorite show of all time, and also in part why I became a Parks and Rec commissioner in City of Vacaville, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Love it.
But yeah, so yeah, I started a couple years ago. Journey Coffee in Vacaville, they came to us back in 2017 and said like, hey, we'd love to start selling your ice cream in stores. So we got a machine, brought it in stores, so we actually sell it at Journey Coffee in Vacaville and Fairfield. They have it. But then on top of that, you know, one of the things I'm really passionate about is teaching other people how to make ice cream. So me and my 3-year-old daughter, since she was 1.5, we've actually been posting videos on YouTube and on Instagram of tutorials teaching people how to make ice cream. So we've been able
Just
to
a
see.
reminder, if you look directly at the camera while Reagan's on it, you can go blind. That's how cute she is. Okay, go ahead. You need
Yeah, so,
those like you need those eclipse glasses to look at your phone.
oh, and she is so funny, just so unbelievably funny. So for me, it's just been so much fun as a dad to be able to experience some of these memories. And now Sienna, like she just turned 1, so she'll probably get into it soon. And for me, it's just a way for us to create memories. And I always say that like, you know, our entire mission is to encourage other families, especially dads, to get in the kitchen, make some memories with their kids. So that's a huge part. So in terms of how you could support, if you're in Vacaville, Fairfield, come on by Journey, get some ice cream. But honestly, the easiest way is just find us on YouTube, subscribe, find us on Instagram, engage with our content. I really just want to be able to reach other families to just encourage, especially dads, to just create memories, especially in the kitchen with their kids, because it's such an impressive way. It's such an incredible way for them to be able to grow up with these memories in the kitchen. So
Love it.
that's who we are. Yeah.
You're the best, dude. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
you. Thanks for being a
I
part of
appreciate
this.
you. Anytime.
Talk to you soon. Go Pacers.
All right. You got
Hey, Warriors
Pacers.
are out, bro. I'm fully in on the Pacers. Let's go.
Right on. Let's do it. We'll see.
All right. See you, buddy.
Take care.